There we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Pack a Day Live. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for being here. We'll get to as many questions as we possibly can over the next 45 minutes to an hour. Really excited to chat Packers. Obviously, huge game coming up, Packers Vikings. Now, probably everyone wants to talk about Jaire Alexander. I'm sure we'll dig into that a little bit as well. Still coming off it feels like a mixture of it just happened, but also forever ago. A resounding victory over the New Orleans Saints. I'm not exactly sure how huge it was in the scheme of things against a practice squad Saints team is what it felt like. At least that's what Green Bay made it feel like, which is, again, credit to Green Bay and what they were able to accomplish in that game. But obviously, again, whatever you guys want to get into today, we will get into. Super chats will always go to the top. Once we get to about 15, 20 minutes left, we'll probably go to about members only chats at that time. But between now and then, we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. We will start with my good friend Chicken. Andy, the Packers only had to make 5 players inactive this past game. They made Jacob Monk the 6th, though. Is there something besides the scene, behind the scenes, I'm assuming you mean, like bad practice habits that is causing this? So a couple things. One, the reason that they had the 6th inactive was because they had the practice squad call-up. So because of the practice squad call-up, they needed to make an additional player inactive for the game, which is why that would happen. As far as why Jacob Monk has been inactive specifically, your guess is sort of as good as mine, but what I can tell you is that they want their best players active for game day. And clearly right now they believe that Andre Dillard, Travis Glover, and Kadeem Telfort are better options coming off the bench as depth pieces than what Jacob Monk is. I would assume that those 3 are just simply ahead of Jacob Monk at this point. It's slightly interesting because in theory, in practice, Kadeem Telfort, tackle, Andre Dillard, tackle, Travis Glover, tackle. It doesn't allow you a ton of versatility. Usually one of the biggest things that you can have going for you when you're active on game days is that versatility. And Jacob Monk theoretically would be able to give you some left guard, center, right guard versatility, specifically on the interior. And with him being out, none of the other guys really have that. Now, Kadeem Telfort has done left tackle, left guard, right tackle. That one I can understand. He seems to be the first guy and next guy up off the bench if need be. But the Travis Glover over Jacob Monk is interesting. Even Andre Dillard to some extent over Jacob Monk is interesting. But my guess is they just feel more comfortable with those 3 guys than they do with Jacob Monk at this point in time. That can change. Earlier in the year, Monk was active and guys like even Telfort, Dillard, and Travis Glover were not. So we'll see if Jacob Monk can get kind of back in the good graces and active for game days. But it's been probably 4 or 5 weeks now that Jacob Monk has been the guy that's kind of been that healthy scratch. Bummer for him. And that'll be something that he has to continue to work at to try to get active on game days. And then, more importantly, if they don't feel super confident and comfortable with him being even one of the top 8 offensive linemen, that could change the calculus in the offseason just a little bit with how they view that center position. It doesn't seem like they think that Jacob Monk is ready to come in and step up in that spot right now if he can't even get active on game days. We'll have to wait and see. And I think this offseason is going to be a huge one for Jacob Monk. Ralph, thank you for the super chat. I think the Packers know how injury prone Jaire is and said, yeah, you're not playing until the playoffs. I can understand that theory. I don't think that's the case. The first thing I'll say is if that was the case, if they were simply like, I guess it's a fine line because you can't just come out and say, we're going to rest Jaire until the playoffs, because then it gives the connotation that these games are less important, that you don't have to have everyone, all hands on deck. I guess there is a somewhat of a fine line there. I guess the other thing is they, if that was their thinking a few weeks ago, they could have put him on IR and made sure that he was out for 4 games or whatever so that they couldn't bring him back and they could have had that extra roster spot between now and then. I don't think that that's the case. I think this is simply his body is not responding to this the way that they had hoped. What's really cloudy about all of this, up until today, where finally he was limited again, is that he's practicing in full. There's no limits to what he can do in practice. Like a full designation in practice is a very interesting thing in this scenario because you're saying there's nothing he can't do in practice, which means that when you go 11 on 11, he's out there doing everything. If not, then he's limited. And they have been listing him as a full participant, which is very strange. Now, there's always a little bit of a difference between the comfortability of what you're doing in your own practice and live bullets flying on game day. The whole thing is bizarre and strange. And I really want to say that there's no like sort of hidden anything here, but it's weird. It gives me somewhat of the Zadarius Smith sort of vibes in his final season, where we never really quite got the updates from the team to say what was exactly going on. I've talked about in the past, this is sort of my one complaint from a Packers standpoint, is that I think they do nobody any favors by being extra tight-knit on this and not just being a little bit more transparent. People start turning on Jaire Alexander. Maybe that doesn't matter to them. Maybe they don't care what the outside world is thinking, but people start thinking that Jaire Alexander's not doing everything in his power to get back. I don't think that that's the case, or that Jaire Alexander is maybe, trying to save himself, or like when you're not transparent about it, it allows everyone's opinions to go into it, whether it's they're just saving him for the playoffs, or whether it's that Jaire doesn't want to go out there, or he's not doing everything he can to get back, or that the team is frustrated with Jaire, or that there's some sort of chasm between what Jaire thinks he can do and what the Packers think he can do. All of these theories just float out there. And with the Packers not giving any definitive detail, they all sort of grow life of their own. The most likely scenario is that Jaire's pushing everything he can to get back as soon as possible. The knee's not quite responding the way that you would want it to. He's frustrated by it. The Packers are frustrated by it. They would love him out there. He can't be out there, and both sides are doing everything they can to get him back as soon as possible. Do I agree that just the way that Matt LaFleur answers the questions about it, that it seems a little bit like, it feels almost a little frustrated there, Matt. Feels like you're a little bit, maybe disappointed that he's not able to play, and not in a way that's just of course you're disappointed he can't play, but almost like, hey, this is out of my control, I can't do anything about it sort of thing, but not in just an injury standpoint. That's what it feels like, but I have no idea. And again, I want to just believe that this is the knee not reacting the right way. I have no idea. I wish I knew. I wish I could tell you. I wish it could be like, hey, by the way, it's this. I got nothing. I do believe, and just based on Matt Schneidman's reporting on it when he initially got the re-injury, he had the interview with Jaire, and Jaire was very transparent about everything, basically saying that when he heard it initially, he did everything that he could to get back as soon as possible. Stayed in Green Bay throughout the bye week, rehabbed it as thoroughly as you could possibly rehab it, and tried to do everything he could to get back right away. Went back in against the Bears, re-aggravated it. And he said at that time, remember, it was a 3-week absence prior to him going back in against Chicago. He said at that time, it was probably going to take longer than the 3 weeks it took last time, because he went 3 weeks, rehabbed it as hard as he could, and he re-aggravated it. So it wasn't just going to be this 3-week thing. It was basically saying it's probably going to take longer than that. Well, it's now longer than that. And I do think you are probably at the point in the season where if there's anything where you're not certain, you're going to stay cautious. You're going to stay conscientious of where Jaire is at from an injury standpoint. And yes, he has been a little bit more injury prone. I also would argue that it's not just quite as easy as saying, hey, let's give it as much time as it needs and then just throw him back into the fray come wildcard weekend. There's, some potential issues with that as well. Just being in game shape, practicing as much as you need to, all of those sort of things where you're just kind of throwing him back in there after missing a ton of time. That's not an easy thing to do, even for somebody as talented as Jaire Alexander is. I don't know where this ends up. I think ultimately the best way to look at this right now is do not expect Jaire back this regular season. Hope he can come back in the playoffs, but don't have your breath held too much. And you just kind of take it one update at a time. But it's pretty clear he's not going to play against Minnesota. I can't imagine that they're going to then play him against Chicago. And then you, again, see if he can play in that wild card weekend. As far as what this means for Jaire next year, again, reading between the lines, it feels like maybe there's a little bit of frustration there between the Packers and Jaire. That could just be that's it. It's just reading between the lines. There's no truth or substance to that. If I were betting today, if I were guessing today, which this ultimately is, I don't think Jaire is back next year. I think that they probably go in a different direction. I think they probably understand the value of being healthy. And Jaire's just missed too much time over the last handful of seasons. And I just don't think there's going to be the level of trust there that he can hold up to the rigors of a season. I could easily be wrong. I'm not definitive on it. I think there could be a variety of different ways that it could go. Maybe a trade, maybe a cut, maybe a restructure, maybe, a kick the can down the road with his contract a little bit. I don't know. But my gut tells me today something just feels a little bit off. And I could be totally wrong on that. But that's just what my gut says. If I were guessing today, I would say probably not back next year, but you can worry about that down the road. Right now, the big concern is, can you get him back sooner rather than later, specifically come wildcard weekend? She said, Joey, thank you for the super chat. If Jenkins can't go, what's the O-line setup? He was just rest, veteran rest. So there's no real concern there. I'm just double checking it now. I know that was the initial report. Just pulling up the actual injury report here really quick. All right. So Elton Jenkins is, it is a knee. Interesting. I thought it was initially listed as vet rest, or at least I think that was what was tweeted out. I forget if it was by Schneidman or who, but it was vet rest, but it is knee on the injury report. So yeah, that's not obviously ideal. The answer to your question is probably the easier part. If he can't go, it would be Zach Tom at right tackle, Sean Ryan at right guard, Josh Myers at center, Kadeem Telford at left guard, and then Rasheed Walker at left tackle. Maybe there's a world in which Kadeem is just better on the right side or feels more comfortable on the right side, and they feel like Sean Ryan could play either. So maybe Sean Ryan's at left guard and maybe Kadeem Telford's at right guard. That could be one potential switch, but it would be Kadeem Telford would be the first guy up in that situation would be my guess. And my guess is they would just do a 1-for-1 and put Telford in at left guard for Elton Jenkins in that situation. But yeah, I did not realize that was a knee. I know the initial injury report today, or their initial report from the beat writers, was vet rest, but apparently that is not the case. So not ideal situation there. All right, let's go back to the top of the list here. Chicken enjoyed the rookie breakdowns also. Awesome. Those are ones I just kind of thought of. I'm like, we've always done the scouting reports right after the draft. I'm like, we never kind of went back and revisited them at the end of the season to see what they got right, what they got wrong. I don't think I'll do any other draft picks from this past year. We went over Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, Jordan Morgan, and Edrin Cooper so far. So we've gone through those four. I don't think there's probably the appetite for the rest of them as maybe there would be for those four. Marshawn Lloyd hasn't played enough, so we don't really even know if the scouting reports are right or wrong. But maybe we could go back at some point and look at the scouting report for an LVN. Maybe we could go back and look at a scouting report for, Quay Walker or Devontae Wyatt, something like that. Those could be fun to do at some point. So maybe we'll take a look at that. What do you think Cox's upside is? Also, hope you and your family had a good Christmas. It was a great Christmas Go Pack. Thank you so much for that. Hope you and your family had a happy holidays as well. I think he can be a starting defensive end in this league. And in fact, I talked about this the other day, where I'm not so certain he's not the second best defensive end behind Rashawn Gary right now. And if he's not there, I think he's close. And I think he has every right and ability to get there. Now, time will tell. It's still a pretty small sample size for Brenton Cox overall, but I love the way he plays. He has a natural intensity and physicality to his game. I think he understands how to win as a pass rusher. He's far physical enough to be a good edge defender. And I think there's less sort of question mark as to how he fits. He just is a very natural defensive end. LVN, there's still upside there. Former first round pick, a lot of talent. Hasn't lived up to it yet. We'll see if he can get there. Kingsley Nigbari, good player. I think he's ultimately more of a rotational player. But man, I'm kind of pining for a few more Brenton Cox snaps and kind of seeing him opposite Rashawn Gary a little bit more. I'm not certain that Rashawn Gary, Brenton Cox within Devontae Wyatt and Kenny Clark, I'm not sure that that's not your best four-man defensive line right now. And really kind of in all facets. They can stop the run. They can rush the passer. That might be my best four defensive line right now. We'll see. I like Carl Brooks. I clearly still like guys like LVN and Kingsley Nigbari. I think there's talent there. But man, if I had one play and I was going to rush with four or had to stop the run with four, I'm not so certain. Again, I wouldn't have Gary, Cox, Wyatt, and Clark out there as my potential best four. Andy, I know you've made the Aaron Jones comparison to Jaire in regards to cutting him. The team asked Aaron Jones twice to restructure. Can we do that with Jaire before insisting on cutting him? I mean, you can always ask. If you're going to cut him anyway, like sort of the old adage is if you're going to ask for a restructure for a player, you better be ready to cut him. So if Green Bay is ready to cut him and they're just like, you know what, we're going to be done. You can always ask him of like, hey, we'd like you back, but we want you on a, a third of the cost you are right now. And if he says yes, I'm like, awesome, you win. But he's not going to say yes in that scenario. He's probably going to be worth it to some team to take a flyer on because his talent is too immense. And teams can always use corners, and you can always get a fresh start somewhere. So he'll have value on the open market. I don't think there's any real chance of a restructure where he takes less money to stay in Green Bay. It feels like, again, just reading between the lines here, don't know anything. Feels like with this, suspension last year and some of the injuries that he's gone through, is it just time for both sides to move on? It kind of maybe feels that way. Green Bay has been able to settle in without him at corner and play some pretty good defensive football. And now you have an offseason where you can kind of rebuild that room if need be. It seems like that's probably the best way to go, but I don't really necessarily see a full restructure or anything like that. But again, if that's what you think is the difference between, deciding to keep him or not, you could make that determination and you could offer it, but I don't think he'd take it. I don't think there's really going to be much to it either way. I thought Andy was going on the Paul Farrington show today. I did go on the Paul Farrington show today. I don't know if they've uploaded it yet. Maybe that's something that they're going to be uploading later, but I was on there earlier today. I did record with them. And again, not sure when they're going to upload that, but yes, was on with them today. I know we're in the playoffs, but because of losing earlier and being swept by Detroit, it'd be nice to beat Minnesota on Sunday. It'd be really nice to see if Love can settle down and carve them up like last year. Yeah, I don't have no notes on that one, Ben. I totally agree. Also, I'm kind of a fan of the Kraft sneak. He's an angry runner like Jacob, so I feel like a 1 yard or under, he has an excellent chance of getting it. The one thing I will say is once he gets under there, it's very predictable as to what they're going to do. And there is like that, like kind of half beat where like he gets under center and like everyone's like, oh, all right, well, clearly we know what they're doing. You almost have to have something off of it just in case like they crash down quick enough. But they probably wouldn't. I don't think they're all of a sudden going to get Kraft and have him like run a speed option with Josh Jacobs or something. But it's worked. I don't mind it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that's something that can be sustainable. But yeah, I like it. It's just a little bit predictable once he gets under center. You have to go pretty quick once he gets under there to try to still catch him by surprise because there's only one play at that point that's being run. It's a QB sneak, either left, center, or right. And Kraft can obviously choose that based on what, the front looks like, but there's not a lot of variety when it comes to Tucker Kraft under center. We'll just put it that way, but it's worked so far. And I certainly, if they want to continue to run it until somebody stops it, again, I'm pretty fine with it. Is the defense's pass rush and tendency for takeaways in good enough shape to carry the team through the playoffs? No, it is not in good enough shape to carry them through the playoffs. It is far enough in good enough shape to help them win in the playoffs, to be a piece of why they are winning, to win a game if need be in the playoffs. This is never a situation where this defense should have to carry them through an entire postseason. But for the first time in forever, no Disney song pun intended there, they are in a situation where it's not just up to the offense to win games. They can win games in a variety of different ways. And if they get in a defensive struggle, I think the defense can help them win that. And if they get in a shootout, the offense, I think, can help them win that. If they get in a game where they need to play from special teams, we've seen against Chicago, they can do that. Or at least their special teams isn't going to be catastrophic, knock on wood, to maybe knock them out of the playoffs. So this to me feels like a complete team that they can win games in a variety of different ways. Offensive, defensive, special teams, complementary, shootout, drag out, brawl, whatever it might be, triple threat match, anything else. I think that they can find a way to win. Doesn't guarantee they will, but I think they have the ability on all phases to go out and find ways to win football games, regardless of what that individual game brings to the table. And I think that's your best option because you look at that run by Green Bay in 2010, right? They had some games where their offense was clicking. Look at Atlanta in that game. Now, clearly the defense came up with some big plays in that one as well, including the Tremont pick six, but the offense was rolling in that game. Against Chicago, the offense was kind of sputtering. Needed some big plays from the defense, including a BJ Raji pick six, and they got enough from their defense in that one. Philly was a little bit in between. They got some big plays from the defense, some big enough plays from the offense. It was kind of a team win. Same thing with Pittsburgh. But you kind of have to be able to win in different ways. If it's, again, a drag out brawl, and it's going to be a 13-10 game, you better find a way to win that. And if it's a 38-35 game, you better find a way to win it. And Green Bay, I think, has the ability to win in any way, shape, or form. But now they're just going to have to go out and do it. But I think their defense can maybe carry them on a 1-game sort of situation. But they should not have to, nor probably would they be able to go on a 4-game stretch where it's just like, yep, everyone get on the defense's back. They're just going to carry you through the playoffs. That's not going to be the case. But I think they're definitely good enough to help Green Bay get to that point. The media's attempts to get Matt LaFleur to answer health injury questions is hilarious because of his responses. Like, do they never learn? Well, here's the thing, Ben. If they don't ask about it, then they get dragged by people as well, saying, why isn't the media asking about so-and-so's injury? And then when Matt LaFleur gives crappy answers, then it's like, well, why is the media even asking about this? It's a no-win. There's nothing that they can do. I give credit to Bill Huber for asking the question, even though he knows the response he's going to get. But he's doing his job. He's doing exactly what he should be, asking about the injuries, trying to glean as much as possible. And look at today. Today's an unbelievable example. If Bill Huber did not ask about Jaire Alexander, right? We assume that, hey, there's probably a decent, like, he practiced again. Is he going to be in or is he going to be out? We learned because of Bill's answer today, he's not likely to go this week, that there is still an issue there. And that it is no more likely than it was last week that he's going to play this week. Like, we actually learned something that we did not know because Bill asked the same question that everyone asks every single day. And it's, trust me when I say this, in a couple different ways. Number one, there's no worse question to ask, right? If you get in there and you get to ask questions, like, there are questions that are going to maybe help you write an article or talk about something. There's questions where it's going to be beneficial to everyone to kind of learn what's going on about the team. There's questions that you've thought about for a while and are like, this is going to be a great question. There's nobody that's pining to go in there and being the first one to be asking about what's the status of Jaire today. It's the worst question. And the most likely crappy answer that you're going to get in return. So it's a thankless thing to do. And I give a ton of credit, especially to Bill Huber, is usually the one that asks I don't want to say like the tough questions, so to speak, but the ones that nobody really wants to ask, but somebody needs to ask them. He constantly does that. And it's super beneficial because today we learned about Jaire's injury. And had he not asked that, we wouldn't have learned about it. We went to learn that his status is probably unlikely for this week. So yeah, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And those are the worst questions to ask. So I give Bill a lot of credit for asking them, even if you know the answer that you're going to get, and it's going to be he's limited, or we'll give him through the end of the week, or whatever, because you never know if you're going to actually get an answer. And even if you get the same one every single day, it's still kind of in your job description that you need to ask those questions, because it's one of the biggest things that you're trying to glean through the course of the week is who's playing and who's not. So I give Bill a ton of credit for that. It's not a shot at me. Nice to hear you, Paul Brettel, ask a question when I've only been able to recognize Spoff, Wes, and Tom on occasion. Unfortunately, I haven't been to a ton of weekly pressers. In fact, I probably haven't been to one since, I don't know, like week 1, somewhere like that. I talk about this from time to time, but the ROI for me getting down to Lambeau is really, really rough through the course of the week. If there was something where it was like, you got to see practice and like what you saw at practice mattered, and then you immediately went right to press conferences and you immediately went right into locker room, and you got to get, kind of in and out in like an hour and 15 hour and 30 minutes or whatever it might be. And it was all in, one fell swoop. I could probably pull off that a little bit more and it'd be a little bit more worthwhile. But what happens is, for me, again, I'm 25 minutes away. So I got to drive 25 minutes there. And then you go to the practice portion. And then the only thing that you're open to for practice is the first 5 minutes or first 10 minutes or so. The only thing you get to see is stretching. And the only thing after stretching you get to see is about 5, maybe 10 minutes of individual drills. Just the guys just throwing around the football, working on a couple technique things. And then you get kicked out. And the only thing, and I mean the only thing that you can glean from going to practice and being there is, 1, if somebody's not practicing, or 2, if there's all of a sudden like a new player there that we didn't know about, a new practice squad guy or something, of like, oh, that guy's new. Those are the only 2 things. You can't glean anything else from practice, like, period. And for me and you and everyone else, what's going to happen as soon as that 10 minutes of practice is over? Everyone that's there immediately tweets out if there's any new player, if there's any new injuries, if there's anyone that's not practicing, if there's anyone that's now practicing that wasn't. Everyone gets that moment, like the moment that those guys are done attending practice, right? So for me to go there and take attendance is meaningless. And then for me, again, for what I do, going in and asking questions in the locker room isn't a super, awesome use of my time. It's not something I get a ton out of. And then you have that gap too, where there's like an hour and a half between the practice and then Matt LaFleur and then locker room. And then you end up going there 25 minutes. Then it's like a 3-hour period of time and then 25 minutes back. I'm talking about 4 hours every single day of my day that's just gone and I get nothing out of it. Absolutely nothing. So if time were unlimited and I could go there and attend practice and ask, questions at the press conferences and go in the locker room, man, I would love to do so every single day. And it's what I do in training camp because it's super valuable, right? We actually get to see what happens at training camp, and the press conference is either right before or right after, and locker rooms right after that. So I get to do everything and it's fun and I love it. I love every second of it. In season, there's just not enough value in it to do it, to be honest. But I love doing it when I get to do it, especially in the off season, but in season's really, really tough. Here for the live stream in the UK, Go Pack Go. John, thanks so much for being here. Go Pack Go. Hi from the UK, John Hawkins. So yeah, King Kermit, thank you for being here. Heading to La Crosse to visit family. Such an awesome city. Have you ever been? I have been to La Crosse. I think only once. When I was younger, and it was the vacation from hell, is how I would deem it. It was when the Women's World Cup was on and the Brandi Chastain ripping the shirt off shootout final. I was huge. I still am huge into soccer. I was huge into that women's team, Mia Hamm and Brandi Chastain and the entire group. Had watched every minute of soccer up until that point of the World Cup up until that point. They get to the championship and we are set to go on vacation. And the one thing that I wanted for me personally during that vacation was to watch that World Cup game, which we did not do and did not get to see a second of it. And I got to the very end. We got to, I think, a bar to go to lunch, and Brandi Chastain had just ripped her shirt off and was celebrating the final goal. That's what I got to see of the final game after watching every minute, after being so jacked up for it. So I was pissed about that. And then our car broke down, and it was a huge issue, and that was a major problem. Then we didn't have a car on our vacation, and this was pre-Uber days and everything like that. So that was a major problem. And then we went biking a day in La Crosse, and I think it was my sister got in like a bike accident and like tore up something and had to go to the hospital. And those are literally the only three things I remember from that vacation. Everything else was just brutal. There was nothing to do at the time. I was probably bitter about everything else. It was the vacation from absolute hell. And I don't think I've been back to La Crosse ever since. I'd have to think about that a little bit more if there was ever anything else I was there for, but that's the only time that comes to mind. I'm sure it is a beautiful city. I have nothing against La Crosse itself, but my one experience was literally the vacation from hell. So that's my only recollection of it. Any cornerbacks on the open market next year that intrigue you? Matt, I haven't taken a ton of look at free agency yet. So I'll take a look at that eventually. I know DJ Reed is out there. There's probably a couple other guys, but as soon as the season is done, we'll jump into free agency and then into the draft, and we'll look at all that stuff in very, very, very close detail and with a fine tooth comb. And we'll nerd out over all that stuff, but in due time, we'll get there eventually. King Kermit, bro, I watch body cam videos on YouTube, and 90% of the videos come out of La Crosse, Wisconsin. There was the that's where the big party is. Is that Oktoberfest every year that like people went missing for forever? Was that La Crosse? That was La Crosse, right? I'd have to think back on that as well. I think that's true though, where there was like a series of like drownings and missing persons. Is it Oktoberfest, or is it a different? It's either Halloween or Oktoberfest or something that I think everyone goes to in La Crosse, and there's always dead bodies. But I think it's been a hot second since that's happened. I could be wrong on that. With a potential playoff rematch in a few weeks, do you see their respective play callers holding certain plays looks back for a playoff game? Maybe a couple, but I think they're going to go into this game trying to win. And I think they'll still have some tricks up their sleeve. And I think for all these guys, whether it's Flores, O'Connell, Hafley, or Matt LaFleur, I think this is the stuff that these guys live for. Like, they want to be able to draw up new stuff and find new plays and design new stuff. And if they've got good stuff for Green Bay, and if Green Bay's got good stuff for Minnesota, I think they're going to use it, because if you don't use it, you might get into a game against Philly or whomever, and it may not even like that might not even be the stuff that you want to use anyway. And sometimes putting that stuff on tape gives the other teams more stuff that they have to worry about. So yeah, I think they're going to play this to win at least this week. As you get to that final week, that could be a little bit different depending on the scenarios and matchups, but we'll have to kind of see what week 18 brings when we get there. But for now, I think they're still going to be pretty aggressive in trying to win these games. Larry, hope you had a nice Christmas. Looking forward to the Paul Farrington show collab. Yep, just finished that today, and hope you and your family had a Merry Christmas as well, Larry. Zoid Stomper, I initially predicted that we wouldn't see Jaire the rest of the year when the team announced he had a partially torn PCL. Do you think Jaire plays again this year? Your guess is as good as mine, Zoid, and I know he went through this a little bit already, but I don't think we see him in the regular season. Hopefully we get, the Packers get him back for the playoffs. Run Jacobs run. How is Minnesota's run defense? I haven't looked at their like actual DVOA or where they rank from a run defense standpoint. Let's take a look. Making sure I have the right one here. Yeah. All right. We're good. Rushing defense. Vikings have the second best rushing yards allowed per game, only 87.1 yards rushing yards allowed on average, and only 7 rushing touchdowns allowed. That is the fewest, tied for the fewest rushing touchdowns allowed, along with the Falcons and the Chargers. And 87.1 rushing yards allowed per game is second to only the Ravens. And there are only 5 teams that allow under 100 yards rushing per game. And Minnesota clearly one of those, again, at 87.1. And really, the difference between 2 and 3, the Chiefs allowed 98.3 yards per game rushing. So the Vikings and Ravens are heads and tails above everyone when it comes to rush defense. Yes, they do. We just looked that up. King Kermit, you were ahead of me. Do you think Matt LaFleur rests players at all the next 2 weeks? Do you think they're watching the Commanders to avoid the 7 seed? I think they're absolutely keeping an eye on seeding. No question about it. I think they're going into this game against Minnesota to win. I think they'll be very, very cautious with anyone that has any sort of injury. I don't think they're going to rest a player that's healthy. I think if somebody's banged up and there's any sort of question mark whatsoever, I think they will rest them and not push them back in any way at all. I think that's where they'll be cautious. But I don't think they're going to rest anyone going into this week. Next week, I think it's going to be dependent upon what happens this week, what the seeding situations are looking like. Do they play a half the game? Do they play the full game? Do they not play starters at all? I think that's more of a decision for week 18. But for now, it's business as usual. You're going out, you're trying to beat Minnesota. And yes, you're probably the only thing you're considering here is maybe being a little bit extra cautious with guys like Javon Bullard, Christian Watson, Jaire Alexander, those guys. I think at this point, that's probably all you're thinking about. But how will they do against Jacobs? That's the question. Yes, Josh Jacobs can beat even the best of run defenses. I know the Bears rivalry is important, but do we rest starters for the game? We just talked about that. Get rid of Jaire. He is injured too much. I understand the sentiments, and they'll have to make that very difficult decision come the offseason. I think this team, especially with a couple players coming back from injury, could use the reps to keep building. I agree with that, and I think they will play this game to win. I think next week, my guess is even if they decide to rest some players in the second half, I think they'll play guys in the first half would be my guess. But again, I think a lot of that's going to be dependent upon what happens this week and what the seeding opportunities look like next week. Unless I've missed it, but we still don't even know what the official injury on Bullard was. We know it's a foot, but that's as far as it goes. Very annoying at times. We do know with, Bullard, it's an ankle. If you look, he got stepped on. It was a very aggressive stomp. It was the Seahawks game, right? And somebody jumped up. I think it was maybe McDuffie jumped up to go and get a pass to like try to deflect it and landed right on Javon Bullard's ankle. It was nasty looking. It was not fun. So yes, we do know that one's an ankle injury. Had a hard time believing that Ja doesn't want to play. He's got a very aggressive mindset and hasn't shied away from wanting the number 1 wide receivers before. I agree with that, Ben. I don't think here's sometimes what happens. And I'm not saying this is the case. I believe that Jaire is doing everything he can to get back. What sometimes can happen, and again, I'm not quoting this for certain or anything like that, but is the team will clear the player and the player will say, no, I still don't feel right. And that's when you get into some weird situations. I've heard that maybe, and again, I don't know this to be a fact, but I've heard whispers of maybe there was some stuff like that with Bakhtiari. Maybe there was some stuff like that with Zadarius Smith. I don't know. Again, we don't know the ins and outs. Some of it's hearsay, whispers, rumor, whatever. But that's usually when you get into some weird sort of situations where the team says, and the team doctor checks him out, looks at him, says, yep, good to go. We've taken the MRIs, we've done the exams, we've done everything we need to do. And structurally, everything's good. He's good to go. And the player says, actually, I'm not. I don't feel right. I don't feel like I can go 100%. And I don't want to go out there if I think I'm going to re-injure something, or if I feel like I'm going to be hurting the team if I go out and play. Not saying again that that's the case, but that could be one of those situations where it's just awkward and the team thinks he's ready to go and the coaches want him out there and it's important that he gets out there and he just feels that he can't go. And to be crystal clear here, I'm not saying one side or the other is wrong in any of those situations. You could have a medical, a doctor look at everything and check it out and say, yep, good to go. And the player might literally be in significant pain or just not able to give it a go, or maybe there's some sort of mental block and you can understand it. On the flip side, it could be that the player is being extra cautious and the team believes that they should be out there, that they're cleared and good to go, and that you have to play through pain. That's part of being an NFL player. Every situation's different. Again, I don't even know that that's the case in this one, but usually when there's some sort of breakdown and where things get a little bit awkward and where you maybe get some frustrated answers from Matt LaFleur, sometimes it can have to do with the fact that doctors and team are saying you're good, players saying, actually, I'm not. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not. Your guess is as good as mine. But I don't think that he's doing anything to not play or anything like that. I think he wants to be out there. I don't think folks understand he's dealing with a torn ligament. This just isn't a soft tissue matter. It was a partially torn PCL is what it was reported as. What that means of where he's at right now, again, your guess is as good as mine. But yes, anytime there's a tear in a ligament, it's an issue. It's a pretty big issue. No question about it. And again, this is where you just wish there was a bit more transparency from the injury standpoint of like, guys, if Matt just came out and said, guys, he had a partially torn PCL. This is going to take a minute. And, we're not going to rush him back and whatever. But instead, it's like, yep, practicing in full, he's going to be questionable for this week. Practicing in full, he's going to be questionable this week. He'll be, be limited or whatever. Like, without ever giving any, more substance to that, it just allows for everyone to kind of think what they want. And it just, I think, kind of leaves everyone in no man's land. It's my belief the organization is developing their depth as much as they can and still showing respect to the starters. I don't know if that's in regards to Jaire, but yeah, I think that they are doing everything that they can to get multiple players playing time and continue to develop the depth on this team. Kind of heard that a little bit from Jeff Hafley today. And overall, that's a good thing. And I think it's, paid off. I think that depth shows itself when you have injuries to Jaire Alexander, Jordan Love, Evan Williams. You've got Zane Anderson out there playing great football. Like their depth is pretty incredible when you kind of think about it. Is there a world after the season where Alexander isn't on this team? Absolutely. Absolutely there is. Whether that happens, I don't know. But I think to me, it's pretty much up there as a pure 50-50 coin flip. And again, if I were betting today, I would say I think it's more likely that he's not on the team than that he's on it. But I have no idea. Hit the like button. Appreciate that, Helson. With us most likely playing the Rams with Puka and Cup, we absolutely got to sit Jaire till the playoffs. Yeah, I don't think that is exactly what's going to be in their calculus and their thinking in that. But I think that they will take it slowly and make sure that he's ready to go. And I'm sure Jaire will do the same and make sure that they're not pushing him back too soon especially after what happened in Chicago. And if it is, I mean, it doesn't really at some point, right? Like you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit. You've got AJ Brown and Devontae Smith in Philly. You've got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua with the Rams. Even the Falcons have, Darnell Mooney and Drake London, which is not easy. If you would get Seattle, right, you're going to go against DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know they just played them, but that's still a tough trio to go against. If it's Tampa, you're going to go against Mike Evans. If it is the Vikings, you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And if it's Washington, you've got Terry McLaurin. Like there's not, no matter what, you want Jaire back there, right? Like there's not going to be a easy wide receiver matchup no matter what. And either way, there's going to be a number one guy that you want Jaire Alexander to be able to go against. If Bullard plays, do you think he'll start at safety and move Zane to the bench with the same cornerback starters as last week, or bench Stokes and put him in the slot? In my opinion, he is worse slot than Nixon. It's a great question. I really like the way that Zane played, but Stokes and Valentine played well also. My ultimate belief is that they probably take it easy with Bullard and he doesn't play again. I'm going to say, though, that they go with Bullard in the slot with Zane and McKinney at safety, and then they play Nixon on the outside and probably rotate Stokes and Valentine on the other one. That'd be my guess if he does play. Master Bojangles is getting playoff fever. Me too. It can't get here. I don't want to wish away the regular season, but I also feel like the playoffs can't get here soon enough. Vikings have to be the healthiest team in the league. Darisaw is the only starter hurt, and they traded for another starter to replace him. They're definitely on the healthier side, but also don't discount the Darisaw injury. That is a massive injury, and he is a very important player for their team. It's not quite to the Aiden Hutchinson level, I don't think, but it's certainly up there. He is one of the best offensive linemen in the league, in my opinion, and that one certainly stings. I mean, they did navigate already a TJ Hawkinson injury. Harrison Smith was out last week. I mean, quite frankly, like the guy that they probably expected to be a starter the good part of their season at quarterback, and JJ McCarthy is also out for the year. But yeah, outside of that, they're pretty healthy at the moment, especially at this point in the season. There's not much else besides Darisaw, and I don't think they're missing McCarthy at this point because Darnold's played so damn well. But that's pretty much about it from an injury standpoint for them. So yes, very, very healthy Vikings team overall. Yes, did go over knee with Jenkins. Hopefully it's much to do about nothing, not nothing, but he has had that before and still played. Agreed. Again, it just depends on how cautious they want to be. And to your point, hopefully there was no aggravation there or anything. So the Bills doing a lot of 6 offensive lineman alignments. Would you like to see Telford play more? I'm always a fan of 6 O-line alignments, just like throw something out there different. Think you can really do some fun max protect stuff with it in the passing game. Also think it allows you to do some fun stuff in the run game. So yeah, it's not like I'm not feeling like I need to see more Kadeem Telford. Don't get me wrong. By the way, one thing I would love, I don't think this will happen. We talked about, I think we talked about it maybe on the radio show. I don't know if I talked about it on here, but if like there's been some whispers in Miami that if they get eliminated from the playoffs this week, that they would release Calais Campbell and allow him to get picked up by a playoff team so he'd have another chance at a playoff run. I would love for Green Bay to do that. I would also love if the Bears would do the same for Mercedes Lewis. And I would low-key kind of like to see Mercedes back for like John Fitzpatrick. Just get another big-time run blocker in there and I'll almost have your 6 offensive linemen with Mercedes in there. I don't think the Bears will do it, and they're certainly not going to do anything to help the Packers. And even if they did release him, you'd have to clear waivers up until Green Bay. But I would love to see them do that for Mercedes and let him go play for a playoff team. And hopefully Green Bay could bring him in that situation. But I mean, the odds of it happening are very slim. But yeah, I like a good 6 offensive lineman alignment here and there. But again, I'm not exactly pining for more Telford or Glove or anything like that. But sure, I wouldn't mind seeing a few snaps of it here or there. What would Jaire's trade value be, you think? Not much, if anything. Some team would have to take on the injury risk and the contract that's currently out there. It's workable. It's doable. It's not impossible. But if you're thinking anything more than a day 3 pick, I would be pretty surprised if it were anything more than that. And it might just be, that they end up releasing them instead of that. But I would think day 3 pick would probably be what you'd be looking at. What does Goody do during the game? TV broadcast cut to him and he was writing something. He's usually watching it. I'm sure he's taking notes on things that he sees. I'm sure he's, probably also keeping an eye on what the other team is doing if any other players catch his eye. But I'm sure there's a part of him that his work kind of for the week is done by that. He's always working, right? But like he gets to watch the game and see, again, anything that stands out to him. But like those guys have such a keen eye for football too. He might notice something of like, oh, this player's doing this or this player's doing that, or, I think this player could play more or this player needs to play less. And he can give those suggestions to Matt or whatever too. I'm sure there's a variety of things that he's noting down, but for the most part, he's just in a box watching the game and I'm sure observing and taking any notes that he feels are relevant to him and the team. If you had to choose one for the next 5 years, LVN or Cox, LVN or Enigbare, it's a tough question. I would probably still lean towards LVN because I just think his athletic profile is enough where it's going to be really hard for him ever to be bad. I don't know that he's ever going to be great. I don't know if he's ever even going to be good to really good, but I just don't know that he's ever going to be bad. I think there's a good enough player there where he's always a solid contributor. So at minimum, I feel like I get a 5-year, rotational contributing defensive end, where I can't always say that about everyone. Enigbare or Cox could, take a step back, and then all of a sudden there's really nothing that they bring to the table. With LVN, I feel like you're going to get something out of it. So I'll hedge a little bit and say LVN, but Cox would be my next answer after that. All signs point to Valentine breaking out recently. Do you agree, or has it just been bad competition being put in favorable positions? I believe he's being put in favorable positions, but I also believe that he's playing pretty good football. I don't know that I would say like aggressive breakout, but he's playing good football. He's my highest graded corner on the season for Green Bay. And I really like who he is, what he does, how he plays. And to me, like, you can win with Carrington Valentine. Where that stacks him up, whether he's a 2 or a 3 or a 4, time will tell. I would love if you had even more competition and depth at that position. But for now, I feel comfortable when Carrington Valentine's out there. I'll just put it that way. Cox has stepped up. He's been the backbone of the Packers defense. I would say that's probably a little bit aggressive, Daryl. I don't think he's been the backbone of the team these past few games, but he's been a really nice player. And there are definitely signs that he could be a starting caliber defensive end for this team. And I don't know if I want to say like very important player, but a semi-important player for them down the stretch if he can, kind of continue doing what he's doing so far. What are your thoughts on the Vikings only being favored by 1 point? I'm surprised it's so close. It's gone back and forth. Actually, yesterday and this morning, it was Green Bay by a point. And then today it swung back to Minnesota by a point. This just feels like by the end of the, when everything's all said and done, it's just going to be like a pick 'em. Like there's not going to be a favorite in this one, but it has swung back and forth. I'm a little bit surprised because the Vikings are at home and Green Bay's on a short week that this has been, kind of Green Bay even by a point or things like that. It feels like a pick 'em to me. It just feels like a pick 'em. So whether it's Minnesota by 1, Green Bay by 1, pick 'em, anything, honestly, like Minnesota by 3 to Green Bay by 2, anything in there I could kind of understand. But to me, this is just a pick 'em. Go any way that you want with it. If you don't ask, you don't get. Well said, Izzy. John, there has to be some trade value for Ja, maybe not high, but if you can get a third for Rasul, different situations. Injury context is huge. And then contract, the difference in contract between the two players. I do think you get something, but I don't think it's more than a probably late day 3 selection if you do decide to trade him in the offseason. I think he's giving the younger core of players time to develop. Not sure Jaire has taken full participation. If he wants to sit out games to have those younger players to develop, okay, whatever. Don't think that's the situation, Daryl. I think that they are trying to get him back. I think Jaire's trying to get back. I don't think it's happened. And I think there's some, focus on trying to build depth and just have guys go out there and compete, but it's not ever really going to be at the expense of your all pro corner. You want him out there if he's healthy. It just hasn't worked for whatever reason so far. Hey, Merry Christmas and happy playoffs, everyone. Love all the stuff you do, Andy. Thanks, John. You are more than welcome. Is the wave appropriate when the Packers are on defense? Appropriate, yes. I'm not a wave guy, as some of you found out on Twitter this week. If it were up to me, I would just kill the wave. Now, I will make an exception. Like at Badger games, right? They do the wave, then they do the fast wave, then they do a reverse fast wave, then they do a slow motion wave, then they've got like multiple waves going. That is a little bit more of like, okay, like that's a little bit more creative, a little bit more interesting if it's done when the team is on defense. But just the old school classic synchronized standing, come on. What are we doing? Like there's so many different cool things we can be doing at a game. And just never on offense. That's my big thing. If you want to do it on defense, that's cool. You be you. I'm not going to tell you how to fan. But when the team you are paying to see is literally doing a PA announcement to say, knock it off. And when there's literally a Jordan Love video on the Jumbotron saying, you're doing the wave now, don't. Like, let's figure this out. Let's figure out a way to not do the wave when it's on offense. And like, it's not like you go through these like 15 play stretches more often than not. Like just give it a couple minutes and likely the defense is going to be back in the field. And then you can start the wave if you want to start the wave. But please, not an offense. I would love for it just to not be a thing anymore, period. But again, I'm not going to tell anyone to fan when it comes to that stuff. But when the team you are cheering for is literally saying, knock it off, just knock it off. Don't do it when you're on offense. So appropriate, yes. Would I like to do it? No. Do I wish it wasn't being done? Yes. But I'm cool. I'm fine with it as long as it's on defense. Just me, or does Ryan actually look bigger, but with better endurance? Yeah, he's had a really nice season. Definitely still levels of inconsistency to it, even within the game, but a value add, and he continues to get better. I really like the way that he's playing. Wish again there was a little bit more consistency with it, but he's one that, like, some of the best blocks of the game you will find are from Sean Ryan, and some of the most inconsistent, worst blocks from the game are from Sean Ryan. But there's more good than bad, and it ends up being a net positive. But just want to see him get rid of a few of those negative plays on a game-to-game basis. For the loud go pack go. See, I would like more go pack goes. Give me more go pack goes, less waves. Like to see the offensive line maul more in 2025 with existing pieces. How best could that happen? Does Ryan at center or Jenkins help the line maul more? I don't think you're probably just going to see it. Like, that's not kind of what they do or how they're set up. You're probably going to see a line of Rasheed Walker, Sean Ryan, I'll do it this way. Rasheed Walker at left tackle. I think Jordan Morgan's going to be at right guard. I think Zach Tom's going to be at right tackle. And then center and left guard will be Sean Ryan and Elton Jenkins in some capacity. Maybe it's Ryan at center and Jenkins at left guard, or Jenkins at center and Ryan at left guard. But I think that's the major question mark. But I think for the most part, this is the offensive line that you're going to get. I don't think it's going to be any more or less Molly than it is right now. I think they do a nice job in the run game. I'd like to see a bit more consistency, but overall, they're phenomenal as a pass protection team, and that's what they're kind of built to be. And they're more than sufficient as run blockers. And I think you will take that from the offensive line more often than not. If you could redo pick one, would you take Morgan or Barton? I know there's a lot of love for Barton, and I did like him coming out, although not as much as most. I don't think he's had, I know like the offensive line geeks will say he's played pretty well. I haven't watched him, but I think like the PFF grades, again, for whatever you want to view that as well, have not been super great. He is at a 55.9 PFF grade on the season so far. So below average is where he's at, just for comparison's sake. Now, obviously in a lot fewer snaps, Barton's played 920. Morgan only played 186, but Morgan's got a 59.2 grade. So again, for PFF, again, whatever you want to put into that, Morgan actually has a better grade than Barton. I think they're probably around the same. Solid pieces along the offensive line that you can win with, that you're not winning because of yet, and that you hope over time you can win, or that they're going to help you be a piece of why they're winning, right? I think both of them have some versatility. I think Morgan probably is a little bit more versatile. But if I'm going back and can change things, my mind's probably not going to Morgan, Barton. I'm probably looking at some other players who are maybe there. But even then, I think Morgan's still going to pay dividends for this team in the long term. That Dane Brugler scouting report on Bullard was uncanny. It was almost like he wrote that after watching his rookie film. Love reading his stuff, but man would love it if he worked for the Packers. He's really good at what he does. There's a few people that, what I will always say is be careful with who you're listening to come draft time. Everyone's got a draft everything, a draft opinion, a draft all of it. Some people are really good at some stuff. Some people are really not as good at some stuff. I think everyone's always learning, and I think it's an inexact science. Dane Brugler is one of the best. Daniel Jeremiah is somebody that I always lean on. Lance Zierlein is somebody who I think does a phenomenal job. I think there's certain people that are much, much better than others, but I think the best work that anyone does covering the draft is Dane. And the beautiful thing about Dane is he really has you covered for everything. I mean, he gives you the full background report. I mean, that's just stuff that you're not getting almost anywhere else. Locker room stuff, off-field incidents, injury situations, like you're getting all of that. Then you're getting his strengths and weaknesses, which he does a tremendous job on. And then a summary, a grade, you're getting everything. It's really incredible what he can accomplish. I can only imagine how much work he puts into that every year. It's insane. So yeah, he does a great job. And yes, that scouting report on Bullard was very, very impressive. You think Garrett Bradbury has nightmares about Kenny? Anyway, looking forward to that matchup in particular this Sunday. Yeah, that's been a matchup that's been a huge advantage for Kenny Clark. Hopefully that's one he can take advantage of this upcoming weekend. Silver lining to all the injuries on defense, we'll have some guys with fresher legs playing. Zane Anderson is hungry too. Rather have everyone healthy, of course. But yes, sometimes that stuff does develop depth and give you some insight into how some of these guys play when given opportunities. And so far, Zane Anderson's been one that's made the most of those opportunities. X is the best safety in the NFL and best safety coach too. I know there's more talent there than last year. Obviously, Halfley deserves credit, but X has coached those guys too. I agree. Some of the stuff that he has done working with those young safeties, whether it's a Zane Anderson, a Katano Ladapo, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, I think has been super instrumental. I think the corners get a lot out of being able to play with Xavier McKinney as well. All this depth at safety, do you think Oladapo could be a sub-package linebacker? Think of him and Cooper on passing downs. Wow. It would not surprise me if they experimented with that in the offseason, but we'll see. It depends, too, of what happens with Javon Bullard. If they just view Javon Bullard as a long-term slot corner, well, then that changes things as well. Now you have one less safety, and now it's just Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney, and you need depth behind them. Now you have Zane Anderson, but maybe then you feel like Catan should stay at safety more. So I think a lot of things to figure out this offseason with some of these players, and they'll have time to figure that out for 2025 for sure. Cox is listed as 249, but he looks bigger. Dude is big and violent. I agree. I think he's probably a little bit bigger than that at this point. Would wish the media would follow up its Green Bay level reporting. I don't know. Like, are there things that you could probably follow up on sometimes with? Yes. I think Bill asked, 2 or 3 follow-up questions on it today. I don't know. To me, it sometimes gets nitpicky with that stuff. I would just like to see Matt be a little bit better with answering some of those questions. To be honest, I'm not saying he has to give away the farm at all. Like, you can stay vague on certain things, but also make it so that it's a little bit more, I don't know. It's a tough line to walk. I get it. I'm not like frustrated with Matt or anything. I think there could be maybe a little bit better for all parties, but I don't know. To me, I give Bill a lot of credit for asking the questions the way that he did. And I think the media, for the most part, does a really great job covering the Packers. Was the off-field issue the only reason McManus was available for the Packers to scoop up? Yes. Anyone else tired of Jaire? Here's what I will tell you. You nor I know the situation. It's as simple as that. It's hard to judge somebody when you have all the facts, and it's even harder when you are completely left in the dark. I don't know how you jump to a conclusion one way or the other of who's at fault, or even if there's fault in this situation. The most likely scenario is that the dude's hurt and he can't play. That's the most likely scenario, and there's no fault to be had. It's just an injury. Even if it's somewhere in the middle where the Packers think he can play and he thinks he can't, that's a he said, she said sort of thing. And we don't even know that that's the case. Like, we are too much in the dark to make a judgment call on what's going on here, or who's at fault, or if there's even any fault, or if there's even anyone to point a finger at. If anything, the one thing I will say for certain is that we can make a strong determination that Green Bay made a pretty stupid mistake playing him against Chicago. That's one that we can point a finger at and say that was dumb. Outside of that, I don't know how you begin to shuffle and point blame at somebody, because in all likelihood, it's just an injury and he can't play. Maybe it's something far more nefarious. Maybe Jaire hates the Packers and is wishing to get out of here as soon as possible. I don't think that's the case, but my guess is it's probably just an injury. And I don't know how any of us can come to the conclusion of, oh, this guy sucks because he's not playing, when it's probably due to injury and we just don't know anything different. That's all I'll say in regards to that. Where's your prediction for when A-Rod plays, or where A-Rod plays next year? Man, I don't know. Some team will get desperate enough, I think. And he has, I think, played better towards the end of this year. I'd expect his Achilles to react better next year than he probably was feeling this year. So I think he plays, but it's going to be a really interesting scenario. I don't know that I have a team off the top of my head, like your Tennessee or Raiders, things like that. But man, I don't know. I don't have a good feel for it at the moment. What are your thoughts on the Browns taking a quarterback in the first round and benching Watson? How is he still expected? I don't think he's expected to be the starter anymore. I think they are going to have to move on from him in some capacity. I don't think you can bring him back as the starter next year. He's done. He's just done. I wanted a Ja versus Jets rematch. If he isn't out there, I hope Valentine shuts Jets. I don't think there's any shutting Jets down, but Green Bay will do their best and give it a shot and try everything that they can. All right, I'm going to get to just member questions. So we'll go for maybe 10 more minutes here, and we'll get to just member questions the rest of the way. Try to go a little bit lightning round here. Malik is traded. A-Ride Sods is a backup. Yeah, I don't see that happening, is he? Hey, thanks for all the content, Andy. Love this. I have to drop and help my kids with some Christmas stuff. Go Pack, go, and Merry Christmas, John. How dare you put your family and kids above the Pack a Day podcast? Appreciate you, my friend. Let's see. Sign a guy to a big contract and he immediately starts regressing. Packers luck. They need to stop doing it. There's been some of that for sure. It's been, I think, more unlucky, like you say, than anything else. I think they're just saving him for the playoffs, playing him until the then doesn't benefit them at all. He's practicing to stay sharp. You could be right, Gary. Like I say, your guess is as good as mine on this one. Ben, especially since Minnesota replacement left tackle from Jacksonville has penalties. Yeah, he's not great. He's fine. He's serviceable. He's an okay starting left tackle. I miss Big Dog as well. Your Zach Tom and his agent, Packers come to you offering 6 for 120, 70, 75 mil guaranteed. Would you take that? It would be tied to third highest right tackle. Yeah, I think I would probably take that if I were Zach Tom. I think I would probably take that. I'd have to look at it. Again, not saying for sure, but I mean, it might be a little long. I might try to get more in that 3-year range so I can get one more big contract, but I would certainly consider it at that point. And structure would be huge, of course, as well. Andy, I know the offense still has room to grow. Do you have any concern about realizing all that potential before it's too late, before end of season, or as long as it's when needed? Or as long as it's when needed? Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's always concern of like, will you play your best football when it matters most? Can you reach that potential that we think the team is capable of reaching? I think to some extent, every team has that. Every team's going to try to play its best football in January and February that's in the playoffs, and every team's going to reach for that ceiling and try to get there. I don't think that's something that's necessarily specific to the Packers. And it's also, you know, as much as we like to say like, oh, imagine what they could be, the best version of it rarely happens like that. You're usually always striving for it. It always is going to come up a little bit short. I think like this past week, now let's just pretend, let's say the Saints are a better team than what they are, right? I think this past week's a great example of it, where you get 34 points and you feel pretty good about that output, and you get 6 scoring drives on your 8 drives, 4 touchdowns, 4 for 4 in the red zone, again, putting up 34, but you feel like they could have scored 50. Well, okay, well, that's hard to do. Like putting up 50 is a very difficult thing to do in this league, regardless of who you're playing against. And a 34-point output and that efficiency on offense is still really damn good. I think that might just be who they are. They might be a team that consistently gets to 30 points every single week, but sometimes almost frustratingly so. It's not a bad team to be. If you're that good at offense, top 5 in DVOA, top 5 in scoring, whatever it is, and continue to put up 30 points a game, I think you take that regardless of how it looks. And even if there is more meat on that bone, you have to be pretty thrilled with the way that they've been able to put up points lately overall. Troy, has the progress of every one of our wide receivers been slowed due to the depth the team has? The organization is always wanting to get their young players on the field to develop them. I don't think so. I think there have been some plateaus or maybe even a step back here or there, but I don't think it's been due to the depth that they have on the team. Maybe a little bit here and there, but I think everyone's getting opportunities. I think everyone still has an opportunity to grow. And I'd like to see guys like Watson, Wicks, Dobbs, and even Reed continue to take that step forward, because I think the opportunity is out there still for all of those guys. All right. Jason, have you had a chance to watch Rodgers Enigma yet? I've enjoyed it. He definitely took a shot at Matt LaFleur for kicking the field goal in the 2020 championship game. I have not seen a single second of it yet. So no, cannot comment on it because I haven't seen a second of it. If we beat them in the Bears and we win on a convoluted count back on same opponents beaten, we beat the Rams. They didn't. I don't know what this means. Izzy, sorry, my apologies. Izzy, 10 Pack a Day podcast memberships. Thank you so much for that. You're the absolute best. To those of you who received a membership, make sure to thank Izzy, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the hell out of it. Like to see our offensive line run block better to help Josh Jacobs so he doesn't have to break 5 tackles to get a couple yards, and we would see more explosive runs with the, I'm assuming, just offense. Yeah, I think there's a piece of that. I think they're probably not getting quite the credit that they deserve. I mean, this is an offensive line that's still going out there and having this run game put up over 100 yards basically every single week. And Josh Jacobs has been very successful. A lot of it's due to Jacobs, but the offensive line is still doing a pretty darn good job. Not perfect, things that they can do better, but I still think you're in a very good spot with this offensive line with everything they're doing on the whole. Jason, thank you for the super chat. Feels like we need this win to prove to ourselves we can beat a good team on the road. Thanks for all you do, Andy. I would love the win just for that extended confidence. I guarantee you, if they lose to Minnesota this week, there's not going to be a single player on that team that doesn't think that they can go into any situation come the playoffs and win those games. In fact, I think they'll go into all of those games super pissed off that they haven't done it yet. I'm not saying it's better to lose. I'm not saying that at all, but I don't think there's going to be any connotation change or like doubt in their minds of like, oh, we just can't get the job done. They'll go pissed off if anything. I don't think there's going to be any doubt from this team. Not sure I want to watch the Rodgers thing anyway. I think I probably will at some point, but just not at this point in time. Just too crazy of a life right now with everything going on. All right, friends, I got to get out of here. Got to go make the kids dinner. So I'm going to go do that right now. We had a Luigi's pizza for lunch, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do for dinner yet, but the Luigi's for lunch, thin crust pepperoni, ultra thin crust pepperoni, chef kiss. Unbelievable every single time. I might just make another one just for the hell of it because it sounds amazing, and got a stack of Luigi's pretty damn thick in the freezer right now. So that, man, the more I talk about it, the more that I want it. You guys all have an amazing night. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all your support on the channel. You're the absolute best. I will be back here tomorrow. I think at some point, it might be an early happy hour tomorrow. I might go live at like 10 a.m. tomorrow. Actually, sorry, that'll be members only Q&A. It might be an earlier members only Q&A tomorrow. I will keep you posted on that once I know my schedule a bit better, but I'll keep you posted. I don't think there's going to be a happy hour this week. There will be a live pregame and postgame show for Sunday, probably before the noon games kick off. So probably like 11 to noon on Sunday for the pregame. And then as soon as the game is done for the postgame. You're the best. I will talk to you soon. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.